I just recently concluded data collection on this project, and it was the larger project on school improvement, cultures of school improvement, leadership, distributive leadership. That stretched out over a period of about 4 years. The grounded grit part of this has been over the last 2 years. And so I'm very much in the middle of data analysis and interpretation, and I'm very interested in any comments or questions or suggestions that you might have. So many of you have probably heard about the recent uptick in conversations about non-cognitive factors associated with academic success. Conversations, discussions, discourses on things like grit, perseverance, academic mindsets, the beliefs that hard work leads to success, these kinds of things. As you might know, most of this literature comes out of psychology and social psychology. And I thought it would be quite interesting to undertake a study that tries to understand how young people acquire these academic mindsets actually in situ, on the ground, all right? Through the everyday creative efforts and commitments of teachers and school leaders, as well as parents and community members. So that was a big motivation for me. You'll also see that I'm situating this in a neoliberal frame. So just the differences between liberalism and neoliberalism, okay? So you can see liberalism, the classic definition here, freeing individuals from constraints of things like hereditary status, established religion, absolute monarchy, right? But look at the definition of neoliberalism, right? So freeing individual entrepreneurial efforts, right? And the powers of finance more generally from the constraints of state oversight, okay? And I think that's a helpful way to be very clear about where the term neoliberalism comes from. Again, look at the top, this tenet that human well-being can best be advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms, okay, and private property rights, okay? And then secondly, that indeed Harvey says that neoliberalism seeks to bring all human activity into the domain of the market, right? And that everything in principle then can be treated as a commodity. So one of my concerns here is how young people in a more disadvantaged area in the Twin Cities metro to the northwest of here, how they make sense of this terrain, how they make sense of the futures that lie ahead of them, all right? And just to go back into how I'm thinking about this and how this is linked to some of my long-term concerns and interests as a scholar. So Leslie showed you very graciously the book that I wrote several years ago based on really a study of how educational advancement is constructed in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, back when I was on the faculty at Ohio State. A little background on this. One of the things that I did after that book is I was invited to be a part of a workshop in an anthropology department on the social life of achievement. And some of you might know the work of Signithia Fordham. Signithia Fordham has done a lot of important work on race and achievement and identity. She's at the University of Rochester there, and she was at the same workshop. And after I gave a presentation, she said, "I'm so glad that you're writing against achievement as an individual act." Writing against achievement as an individual act. And I think that's extremely important for many of us today that see ourselves as equity-minded educators and researchers. And so that book is really about this whole sociocultural apparatus, this local logic, a system of beliefs and practices that support the academic achievement and personal advancement of individual students, all right? So there are all kinds of aspects of this whole cultural system that really make it look like these achievements are the products of individual efforts, but there's so much that underlies these individual outcomes, okay? And so, you know, there's a whole ideology here that actually had a name, a class cultural ideology. The institution was behind young people in certain ways. I'll talk about that a little later. Young people had these specific strategies for kind of getting ahead. And self-advocacy was huge there, the role of parents and how this is normalized. It was expected that parents would play a key role. But I want to focus a little bit over here in this corner here, how the very identities that students seem to be taking on seems oriented towards success and achievement. And so what I did there is I took a notion that, and this goes back to what Dr. Bartlett just mentioned as far as interpreting data, I saw a conceptualization of psychological capital in some of Sherry Ortner's work. And she had talked about this a bit, but I thought that might be something that I can elaborate a little bit, because these seem to be identity components that young people are aware have market value, right? And we all know that this is central to Bourdieu's theory of capital, right? And so these are some of the components of psychological capital that I saw there. And indeed, in many ways, these are adaptations to a neoliberal regime. Especially look at the attachments to individual success here, and also precociously circumscribed aspirations. What I mean there is that these young people, even in 9th grade in this suburb, had strikingly precise ideas about they wanted their future lives to be like. I think this is what Anthony Giddens was thinking about when he talked about the importance of colonizing the future, right, in a neoliberal era, colonizing the future. And that's very, very important. So hang on to this future orientation, because that's very, very, very important here.